Hey, what's up, guys? It's ToastyTabletopGames. Today I've got another deck list. This is one that I'm playing right now, and I'm having a lot of fun with it, so I thought I'd share it. We're playing Abdel Adrian Gorian's Ward, and he's really interesting for a couple different reasons, but we'll get into that. So what he does is when he enters the battlefield, he exiles any number of other non-land permanents you control until he leaves the battlefield. And for each permanent you exile that way, you make a 1/1 soldier creature token, and you get to choose a background. So I guess there's two commanders to go over in that case, because we got for our background we're running Candlekeep Sage, and it's commander creatures that we own have. Whenever this creature leaves or enters the battlefield, it draws a card. So the idea here is that it's a flicker deck. It's a flicker deck that uses Abdel Adrian as some sort of protection to protect our important game pieces. So we're gonna get into it. So the main way we went with this deck is with Alter the Brood. We went with Alter the Brood by going infinite with an infinite combo, or just a sheer value with Abdel Adrian, and we can win win another way with Approach to the Second Sun. I think a lot of people know how Approach to the Second Sun works, but it's if we cast it twice in a game, we win the game because it shuffles itself back into the deck once you cast it the first time. So yeah, let's just go through all the pieces. So we'll start with the creatures. We got Angel Finality. When it enters the battlefield, we're going to exile all cards from target player's graveyard. And this is great because a lot of the times graveyards are just an extension of your hand, especially for decks that are playing black. And sometimes other colors, but typically decks that play black have some sort of recursion in them. And a good way to stop them from getting their pieces, especially if we're going to be milling them all anyway, is with cards like Angel Finality. Next, we got Charming Prince. Enters the battlefield, we get to choose one. We can scry 2, gain 3 life, or exile another creature we own and return it to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. I don't think I need to explain why this is good. I mean, you have lots of options and a way to continue the system of this deck, the main mechanic. Scrying 2, I mean, invaluable. And then, of course, I mean, if you really needed the life, not that you would ever reasonably choose it unless you really had no other thing to choose, you'd gain 3 life. But yeah, and then we have other pieces like Cloud Blazer, which is in every flicker deck known to man. Don't think I need to explain why. I mean, it gets insane value. Gain 2 life, draw 2 cards for 5 mana. Pretty great. And you just flicker it over and over again, and you get all its enter the battlefield trigger over and over again. Next, we got a newer card here, Displacer Kitten. So whenever we cast our non-creature spell, we can exile one target non-land permanent we control and return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So really good here, since we can hit our mana rocks with it this way. We can constantly keep mana up, which is really good. And of course, we can also target our own creatures, so that way we get more value off of them. Felidar Guardian, classic. Don't need to explain why this is in here. Enters the battlefield, we exile another permanent we control and return it to the battlefield. It's great. Does the exact same thing Restoration Angel does, except it hits anything. So once again, we can hit mana rocks with it. We can hit Restoration Angel to go infinite with Alter the Brood. And actually another card that's also kind of new that we also helps us go infinite. But we'll get there when we get there. I got Flicker Wisp in here too, another classic for Flicker decks. When it enters the battlefield, we exile another target permanent and return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So once again, we can hit mana rocks this way, or we can hit our combo pieces, or pieces like Abdel Adrian to create more value, create more soldiers. That's the big thing here. Whenever we get an opportunity to, we're going to want to try to flicker Abdel Adrian, so that way we get more soldier tokens, which we can sacrifice to Phyrexian Altar, since we're playing that. Or we can use them as blockers, as bodies for blockers. And each one of those soldiers is going to mill 1 card with Alter the Brood. So the more soldiers we create, the better. Next, we move on to Geralt's Mind Crusher. Kind of just going on to the mill thing here. If we can win by milling out our opponents with cards like Geralt's Mind Crusher too. by flickering him over and over again. Because when he enters the battlefield, a target player puts the top 5 cards of his or her library into the graveyard. And with Panhard Monocon, which we are also playing, that number doubles to 10. So, you only have to do this like maybe 9 times, 8 or 9 times before that's lethal. And with this deck, I trust it is not very hard. Next, we got Iceland Stalwart, which is actually really interesting because it's basically a Restoration Angel and Felidar Guardian that printed at common that hits non-warrior creatures, which is like insanely good. How it's not a more expensive card beats me, probably because it's in Baldur's Gate. But yeah, I mean, it's literally just a Restoration Angel, just as a Tiefling Warrior. So we have 3 cards in this deck that do that kind of thing. So it's possible to go infinite with Icewind Stalwart, Felidar Guardian, Restoration Angel, and Icewind Stalwart. So it kind of goes in one big circle. Yep, moving on. We got Inspiring Overseer, another common in New Capenna here. Kind of in here for the same reason Cloud Blazer's in here, just for 2 mana less, so you get a similar effect and a flyer. A similar effect and a flyer. So pretty much I don't want to say the same card, but it's pretty much the same deal. Next we got Jace's Mindseeker. Same reason for Geralt's Mind Crusher. He enters the battlefield and the target opponent puts the top 5 cards of his or her library into the graveyard, and we can cast an instant or sorcery from among them without paying mana cost. Which is great. So we can hit cards, hit a lot of really great cards depending on what's in what they mill. I mean, they could mill some sort of draw spell, anything like that. Anything that will be super beneficial. And the keyword here is that you may. So you don't even have to if it's nothing great. And then once again with Panhard Monocon, this is going to happen twice. So we're going to hit 10 cards, and we're going to be casting up to 2 instants of sorceries for free. I get Karmic Guide in here. Karmic Guide is really great for our recursion. So it's possible to get back cards that we need to win the game. I actually won a game with Karmic Guide today. My infinite combo pieces got destroyed by a spell as their abilities are on the stack. And then I just cast Karmic Guide to resurrect a Felidar Guardian, blinking the Karmic Guide to resurrect the other combo piece. And then I just went infinite again. So yeah, it was pretty cool. But yeah, Karmic Guide's got is really good. It's got Echo, so it's gonna die in your next upkeep if you don't pay the Echo cost. But I mean, that's not even really big a deal. Like once it's on the battlefield, there's not much reason. Like once you get the end of the battlefield trigger, there's not much more reason for it to be there unless you're trying to flicker it over and over again. But even then, I mean, you cast it once, you get the value of it, and that's kind of it. Moving on, we got Mana War. This could be probably replaced with something else, since I feel like it's one of the weaker cards in this deck, but nonetheless, it's still nice to have. Since when it enters the battlefield, you get to return a creature to its owner's hand. So you can flicker this a couple times, and you can clear a way for all your little soldiers to smack people. Eliminate big threats, kind of, sort of, since it just goes back to hand. But you at least get them off the board. You could. This is a good way to get creature threats off the board in time for you to do something about it. Next, we got Muldrifter, another classic. Since he enters the battlefield, we draw 2 cards. Not nearly as good as Cloud Blazer, but it's got another redeeming factor with Evoke, so we can cast it for 2 mana less to get the same effect, but it'll die once that ability has resolved. Which is fine. I mean, we can. So this is a great target for Karmic Guide and things like that. Great target for Flicker if we cast it normally, but normally I wind up just evoking it and moving on. But sometimes you just need a body, so it's good to have options. Next we got OG the Exquisite Blade from Commander Legends Baldur's Gate. When it enters the battlefield, we gain 2 life and scry 2, so it's just shy of Cloud Blazer, but it could honestly be better with the second effect here. So it's just when we cast our second spell each turn, we get to exile a creature we control and return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So we get to flicker something every time we cast more than one spell in a turn, which honestly makes it better than Cloud Blazer in that regard, since it's effectively a combo piece. But we can use it to start setting up some cool value combos and all that fun stuff. Moving on, we got Peregrine Drake. I don't think I need to explain why this is in here. It enters the battlefield, and you untap 5 lands, and it only costs 5 mana, so you net gain 0 mana. But I mean, it's effectively a 2/3 flyer that costs nothing if its ability resolves, and it will, provided it doesn't get countered. As long as it hits the battlefield, that ability is going to resolve. Yeah, I don't have Deadeye Navigator in here, though I probably should, since that is a way to generate infinite mana with Peregrine Drake, which honestly, that's probably what I would probably replace Mana War with. Probably replace it with Deadeye Navigator. Yeah, I mean, you generate infinite mana. I mean, your turn just never stops at that point, especially if you have a way to blink things in your hand to generate value and draw more cards, like such as Cloud Blazer. Moving on, we got Recruiter of the Guard here. Recruiter of the Guard is another great commander card. And it enters the battlefield. We're going to search our library for a creature card with toughness 2 or less and put it in our hand. So a lot of really great targets we can hit this with. So, for example, we can hit a handful of things. We can hit Charming Prince. We can hit Cloud Blazer with it. We can hit Displacer Kitten with it. We can hit Filiker Wisp. We can hit Inspiring Overseer. We can hit Karmic Guide. We can hit Mana War. We can hit Muldrifter. We can hit a lot of things. Hit Seagate Oracle. Oh no, we can't. Sorry. We can hit Skyclave Apparition, Solemn Simulacrum, Soul Herder, Spark Double, and Watcher for Tomorrow. So you can hit like almost all the creatures in here, which is really great. You find a way to get your combo pieces out there faster that way. But yeah, I mean, it's just a good tutor. It helps you find the pieces you need sooner rather than later, and that's always a good thing. Next, we got Restoration Angel, and I don't think I need to explain why this is in here either. It does what Felidar Guardian does, but with flying and flash attached to it, which is great. Really good card. We got to use it to go infinite with Felidar Guardian and Iceland Stalwart in combination with Altar the Brood, the 3-card combo, and that's the main win condition. So looking for Restoration Angel, Felidar Guardian, Iceland Stalwart in conjunction with Altar the Brood is how you win with this deck. And because it's kind of tough because you're looking for 4 different cards at the same time, which is kind of rough. But I find that that's just enough to find it somewhat consistently. Finding something that does something similar to Restoration Angel and Felidar Guardian is hard to come by these days because Wizards just doesn't print stuff like that anymore. The power creep has gone beyond that, in my humble opinion. So, not a lot of cards that do stuff like that anymore, or at least ones that are widely known, I'd say. Next, we got Revelark. Revelark, we get the same kind of value that we get with Karmic Guide, except we're hitting creatures with power 2 or less. So we still hit a significant number of our creatures, just not nearly as many. We can cast it for its evoke cost to kill it immediately as soon as it enters the battlefield to get its effect right away. Otherwise, we have a 4/3 flyer that has a die trigger, which isn't bad. And of course, we get our stuff back, which is always good. Next, we got our Seagate Oracle. When it enters the battlefield, we're looking at the top 2 cards of our library. We're putting one into our hand and the other on the bottom. So this is, it's effectively scrying 2, except you're not scrying 2. Yeah, it's kind of weird. But yeah, we're using cards like this to find our combo pieces faster and accelerate the time that it takes for us to find the pieces to win the game. Not too much to explain there. Pretty simple. Skyclave Apparition here is really great since it's a removal spell on a stick. So it enters the battlefield and we're exiling a target permanent, non-land, non-token permanent we don't control with mana value 4 or less. And when it leaves the battlefield, the card's owner creates an XX blue illusion creature token, where X is the converted mana cost of the card. Sorry. So yeah, I mean you hit anything that goes up to 4 mana, which isn't bad. I mean, especially in like higher powered games where a lot of the combo pieces that are winning games already cost 4 or less. Or at least are being cheated out by something that costs 4 or less. So, Skyclave Apparition is a good way to get rid of those threats. Though the one big downside, though, is it, of course, provides bodies. So it doesn't quite entirely remove the threat, but you do get rid of whatever scary thing it could have been before. Solemn Simulacrum's in here too. I mean, honestly, a great commander card. I mean, I think most decks are playing it, or for whatever, most decks are playing it, and I don't really need to explain why. I mean, it enters the battlefield, you find a land, and well, of course, when it dies, you get to draw a card. Solemn Simulacrum, though, is providing us with immense value in this deck, since we can target him to flicker, so we can find all of the basic lands in this deck to ramp insanely fast, and of course we can untap him with Peregrine Drake if Peregrine Drake is also being exiled and reappearing with Abdel Adrian, since if Abdel Adrian leaves the battlefield, all those things are resolving at this. All the things are entering the battlefield simultaneously and resolving simultaneously. So yeah, I mean, you can just rearrange the stack a little bit to find the lands with Solemn Simulacrum, and then you could untap them with Peregrine Drake. So yeah, I mean, then of course, if for whatever reason he dies, you just get cards. Next we got Soul Herder. Soul Herder is really great since he just gets really tall the more we do what our deck wants to do anyways. But I'm really interested in him for the second ability, which is at the beginning of our end step, we get to exile another creature we control and return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So this is Soul Herder is a way for us to blink our creatures and generate massive value off of the creatures that we have, especially if Abdel Adrian has a bunch of little things under him. Most games that you are going to play with this deck are going to have Abdel Adrian with maybe 4 or 5 of these creatures underneath them. So if any one of them in particular are cards like Cloud Blazer, things like that, you are making tons and tons of value off of that one card. So having cards like Soul Herder to flicker Abdel Adrian at will is really important for this deck to succeed. Next we got Spark Double, so we can enter as a copy of a creature or planeswalker we control, except it enters with an additional 1/1 counter if it's a creature, or a loyalty counter if it's a planeswalker, and it isn't legendary if the permanent's legendary. So this is a way for us to do a lot of really weird shenanigans. So we can make copies of other cards that we need to generate value. So we can make a copy. It could become a copy of, say, Cloud Blazer. It could become a copy of Solemn Simulacrum, Peregrine Drake, whatever. But because it's not legendary, we can even make copies of Abdel Adrian and exile Abdel Adrian under it. So we can do some really weird stuff this way. Yeah, there's not much more to talk about there. So next we got Sun Titan. Sun Titan's a classic too. Enters the battlefield, we're going to return target permanent cards with mana value 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. So unfortunately, this doesn't hit our combo pieces since all of them cost 4 mana. But this does let us hit a lot of other good things. So we can hit our lands if they're in there. We can hit pieces like Soul Herder, Skyclave Apparition, Recruiter of the Guard, Mana War, a lot of the value pieces in there, and at least in the main win condition. Yeah, and on top of that, it's repeatable effect if we flicker him, and he's a huge body. But yeah, moving on. So we got Thassa Deep Dwelling, kind of in here for the same reason we got Soul Herder. Of course, it being a creature is a nice thing, but it never needs to actually be a creature. It just needs to be there for the bottom effect, which is to exile another creature we control and return it to the battlefield under our control in the end step. So, that's just what it's there for. We just want to generate lots of value off of flickering our big pieces, and Thassa Deep Dwelling is another way to do it. And then, of course, we can always pay 4 mana to tap something, but I have yet to actually do that, have the need to do that. And our last creature here is got Watcher for Tomorrow, and when it enters the battlefield, it's going to enter tapped with Hideaway, and when it does, it's going to do Hideaway 4, kind of like those lands. And you're just going to look at the top 4, put 1 exile card under it face down, and then put the rest on the bottom of the library. And when it leaves the battlefield, we'll get the card. So this is another great way for us to cycle through our deck really quickly, provided we can find a way to flicker him over and over again. But yeah, so that's all for the creatures. So we're moving on. We'll move on to the win condition. I guess we'll talk about the win condition here for a second. Just the one thing. The all win con. Yeah, so approach the second sun, you just cast it twice. So if you cast it the first time, you gain 7 life, and you get to put back into the library 7 from the top, and we can find it again and potentially cast it again the same turn if we can flicker, use our flicker combo or value machine to just generate enough mana to cast it again or find it quick enough. For example, flickering Watcher for Tomorrow even twice is enough to put Approach to the Second Sun back in our hand because it hits the top 4 cards. So we just find whatever we like most in the first one when it enters the battlefield initially, and then there's the other 3 cards go to the bottom, and we flicker it one time, and then we can put Approach to the Second Sun under him, and then if we flicker him again, Approach to the Second Sun will be in hand. And of course, a lot of these flicker spells are not particularly expensive or have flashback. So as long as we have enough mana to do it, we can do it that way. We can find it relatively quickly with other cards that draw cards like Cloudblazer, Inspiring Overseer, yada yada yada. You get the idea. There's a lot of ways to find this card relatively quickly and just cast it. So I mean, if you don't cast it that same turn, you're probably going to cast it the next turn, and so you'll win within 1 to 2 turns when you find it usually. Yeah, and then Alter the Brood, our main win condition here. I probably should talk about these first, but no, you're a little too late for that now. For each permanent that enters the battlefield, so because it says permanent, it's going to mean like literally everything. So lands included, creatures, enchantments, yada yada, the whole deal. Each opponent puts the top card of his or her library into the graveyard, and so this is basically like a mill deck in disguise. Like it looks like it's just a value engine, and then it turns out that it's actually just a mill deck. And of course, we're going to mill them for all their cards using Abdel Adrian, generating a crap ton of soldiers, or going infinite using 2 of the flicker cards, such as Felidar Guardian, Iceland Stalwart, and Restoration Angel, to just hit each other an infinite number of times. So moving on to the artifacts, we got Arcane Signet. Don't need to explain why this is there. I mean, we add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. That's in our commander's identity. So, I mean, it's only 2 colors in this deck, which is fine. But having rocks like that is important. Conjurer's Closet is another great card. Since it does what Thassa does, it does what Soul Herder does, just on an artifact. And, having ways to flicker our stuff is insanely important. Insanely important. Actually got Mana Vault, since I have a copy of it just laying around. It's just it's a slightly better Soul Ring, and taps for 1 more mana. And we, of course, because a lot of our flicker cards say permanent, we can always flicker Mana Vault to generate an abundance of colorless mana. So, and then we won't take the 1 damage from it being untapped. So as long as we can flicker it, we generate tons and tons of mana, and we can even exile it with Abdel Adrian's effect. So we don't even need to flicker it that same turn. As long as Abdel Adrian gets flickered 1 time, he can hit Mana Vault and just protect it underneath him. Next we got Panhard Monocon. So if an artifact, I think a lot of people know what this does already, but we'll go over it. If an artifact or a creature entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control the trigger, it triggers an additional time. So things such as Sun Titan entering the battlefield to return a permanent with mana value 3 or less to our graveyard to the battlefield happens twice. So we'll look for 2 cards that way. Another great example is looking for 2 lands, a Solemn Simulacrum. Another good one is to draw 4 cards of Muldrifter. It's pretty simple. Nothing. I mean, it's great for this deck. But there's not a whole lot to talk about here. It's kind of explains itself. We got Phyrexian Altar here, so we can utilize it as a sack outlet for the little 1/1 soldier tokens to create more mana to play our turn longer and to potentially win even faster. So this could be a way to cast Approach to the Second Sun a second time in the same turn, or at least cast other spells to help you find it faster. And it's a format staple. Really great card. Next we got Soul Ring. I'm not going to explain Soul Ring. It's just a classic. And we have Sword of Hearth and Home for the same reason we have Conjurer's Closet, because when it deals whenever this creature deals combat damage, we're going to flicker a creature and look for a basic land at the same time. So we ramp, and we can put the herd on some people and generate value at the same time. Really great card. I mean, it's kind of interesting though, because this deck tends to be generally uninteractive. It just cares about wanting to pull off the combo as quickly as possible, and it doesn't need to go to combat or do any of those things. But Sword of Hearth at Home at least incentivizes a little bit of interaction. You give it to a flyer, you get you get a little bit of value for it, even if it does wind up dying. I mean, you could attach it to some little soldier too, even if it does get chump blocked. Yeah, so let's move on to our enchantments. So we got Rhystic Study, real classic. I try to keep these as the same editions as what I have, but yeah. Try to keep them the same editions as I have. Just a personal thing. Yeah, so we got Rhystic Study. Everyone knows what Rhystic Study does, but in case you don't, every time an opponent plays a spell, we get to draw a card unless they pay 1 mana. So we're going to tax them for playing the video, or not playing the video game, for playing the game. We tax them for playing the game and potentially get to our win condition even faster. Especially if nobody has seen what this deck does before. They may not be nearly as incentivized to pay the 1, so you'll probably get to your stuff relatively quickly. Moving on, we got Smothering Tithe. Smothering Tithe, same kind of concept. I mean, we're gonna tax them for drawing cards. If they don't pay 2 mana, we're gonna create a treasure token, so we'll have some extra mana floating around that we can use to play the game even faster, which is great. Not too much to talk about there. I mean, Smothering Tithe is also a really great format staple. And then we've got Teleportation Circle, which does the same thing as Thassa and Conjurer's Closet. So, good cards in the Forgotten Realms set are hard to come by, but it's definitely one of them. It does the exact same thing, exact same wording as Conjurer's Closet, just on an enchantment. Next, we'll go to our counter spells here. We're running 4 counter spells. We got generic counter spell. Classic counter target spell for 2 mana. Sure. Counter Dovin's Veto, uncounterable counter spell, really great. We got Force Negation, a couple free counter spells go a long way. Since an alternative casting cost is we can exile a blue card from our hand and counter a non-creature spell, and it gets exiled instead. And then of course we're playing Force of Will. I really do have a Force of Will, so I am playing it. Yeah, I mean, it's a better Force Negation. We just pay 1 life for an exile blue card, and it counters anything, which is great. Really great card. Kind of frustrating though, since Dominaria United is about to reprint this, but what can you do, right? Next we'll go to our Planeswalkers. We got Teferi, who slows the sunset. This text is real small here, so I'll go ahead and pull up the thing here. Yep, so for +1, we get to choose an artifact, creature, and a land. We can untap them, but if it's a permanent we don't control, we'll tap them instead. We'll gain 2 life for it too. We're really interested in -2 and -7, but that's usually how it goes. It's kind of how it is with Planeswalkers. For -2, we look at the top 3, put 1 in our hand and the rest in the bottom of the library, so we look for our combo pieces faster, which is great. And then for -7, we basically have a Seedborn Muse. So we'll get an emblem that says we get to untap all permanents we control during each opponent's untap step and draw a card during their draw step. So we'll generate lots more value this way too. Our next one, I actually found this guy pretty recently. We got Venser, the Sojourner. And for +2, we get to flicker things, which is amazing. -1, we got creatures can't be blocked this turn, so we could swing in, interact a little bit, which is great. Trigger a Sword of Hearth and Home that way, or King Brago if we were playing him. And for -8, whenever we cast a spell, we get to exile permanents, which is great. So we get big removal just for doing things, which is amazing. We'll be able to remove the entire board by the end of a turn. Moving on to our sorceries. I don't really need to pull it up. We got Flicker. We remove a target non-token permanent from the game and return it to the play under. Well, in layman's terms, we exile a non-token permanent and return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. And it's where the whole term Flicker comes from. This card basically coined the term to flicker something. And not much more to talk about. I mean, it's exactly what it is. It flickers. We got Hallowed Respite, so we flicker a non-legendary creature, and it enters with a 1/1 counter, and it's got flashback. So we hit our smaller pieces. Unfortunately, we can't hit Abdel Adrian with it, but that's fine. We can hit things like Cloud Blazer, Steel, Muldrifter, anything like that would generate value. Anything that would generate value situationally, since situations change. In our last sorcery, we got Seagate Restoration. We get to draw cards equal to the number of cards in our hand plus 1, and we have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. So a great way to potentially pick up a crap ton of cards, especially since we already have Reliquary Tower. So pick up like half the deck potentially, and we can also play it as a land if we really need to for whatever reason. So if you're counting this land in the land count, we're playing 35 lands. And then we have 2 tutors to help us look for... Yeah, I'll get to the instance here in a second. Just want to make sure they were on this list. So we have 2 tutors to help us look for the combo pieces. But specifically Alter the Brood, since it's a little harder to find since it's just 1 card. So we got Enlightened Tutor. We're going to look for an artifact or enchantment, and 9 out of 10 times looking for that artifact. Reveal it and put it on top of the library. And the same is true with Fabricate, except it only looks for artifacts, but it puts it in our hand. But yeah, I mean, we're usually just going to be wind up looking for Alter the Brood. But if it's Enlightened Tutor, then we may wind up looking for things such as Teleportation Circle, Conjurer's Closet, any of these big value pieces. Yeah, we'll move up to our instance. So we got Brainstorm. So we're going to draw 3 and put 2 cards from our hand back on top of the library. Another way to kind of accelerate the game, hopefully find the things we're looking for. If we got Ephemerate, so we're going to exile a creature we control and return it to the battlefield. We're just going to flicker something, but it's got Rebound, so we'll cast it again in our next upkeep for free. Generous Gift is a removal option to destroy a permanent. Good spot removal really is important to a deck. We got Ghostly Flicker, so we can flicker 2 things, and it can be a combination of artifacts, creatures, or lands. So that gives us a way to flicker Mana Vault, gives us a way to flicker Abdel Adrian. We can go kind of wide with this one, or we can even flicker high value lands. Next we got Lazel's Acrobatics. Lazel's Acrobatics actually kind of really blows my mind, because it's another one of those kind of slept on cards in Baldur's Gate, I feel like. But we exile all non-token creatures we control and roll a d20, and they come back a number of times depending on what we roll. So at 1 and 9, they come back at the end step, but on a 10 to 20, they flicker once, and then they flicker again, but they slow flicker the second time and come back at the end step. So you generate plenty of value with Lazel's Acrobatics, and you can also use it as a way to technically phase out your creatures. So if you don't have Teferi's Protection in hand, this is a way to protect your creatures if something starts to target them, or some board wipe comes up. So this is an like a worse Teferi's Protection in that sense, while on top of generating value. We got Momentary Blink, so we flicker something, and then we can cast it again later with Flashback. Path to Exile is spot removal. Return to Dust is spot removal. We can potentially hit 2 things if we need to cast it on our turn. Oops, I forgot to put this in the no section. But yeah, we're playing Swan Song too. We're playing Swan Song to counter basically most non-creature spells, minus artifacts. So we'll hit enchantments, instants, and sorceries, and they'll get a token for it, which is never I'd rather have them have a token as opposed to some sort of game-ending spell or board wipe. We got Swords to Plowshares is another spot removal. Really, we're playing all the classic white spot removal, really. And then, of course, we get Teferi's Protection. Teferi's Protection is kind of a holdout card. We find it and we hang on to it until something bad's about to happen. Like some board wipe or something that really would just ruin our day. Protect our combo pieces this way. But yeah, Teferi's Protection is really great since... we'll just read it since may not know what it does. But until our next turn, our life total can't change, and we gain protection from everything, and everything we control phases out. And we can only cast the spell once per game because it exiles itself upon resolution. But honestly, it's so good that you only need to cast it one time. So yeah, it's important to hang on to that card until we really need it. And next, we're going to go into our mana base. The most expensive part of this entire deck, that's for sure. But that's how it is with Commander. Your Commander deck is only as good as your credit card will allow it, and as good as your mana base is. So first we got Ancient Tomb. So we're gonna tap. We tap for 2 colorless mana, but we take 2 damage for it. High trade-off for accelerating. We got Azorius Chancery. So we're gonna Karoo a land back into our hand as we play it. But as a reward for it, we'll be able to tap this land for two mana. The next turn that we're able to tap it. Got Command Tower for good reason. I don't think I need to explain why Command Tower is here. We got Deserted Beach as a check land. Checks if we have 2 or more other lands, and it enters untapped if we do, which is really great. We got Iganjo as all of the Neon Dynasty lands are really great options to be playing. We got Iganjo as a way to channel something into killing an attacking or blocking creature. Normally it's going to be an attacking creature, and it gets ridiculously cheap when we have a bunch of legendary stuff. We got Fabled Passage as a way to tutor for some basic lands, but then they'll enter untapped, so it's a strictly better Evolving Wilds, which is always great. We got Glacial Fortress. Checks if we control a plains or an island, and enters untapped if we do. We got Hallowed Fountain as our shock land here, so we can pay 2 life as it enters the battlefield to make it enter untapped. We have our Pathway, so we can play it as a plains, we can play it as an island with no drawbacks. So we have options on the table there. We get Irrigated Farmland as a cycling land. We can play it as a land and it enters tapped, tap for white or blue, but we can also pay 2 mana to discard it and draw a card. So always a good thing to have options like that, especially in the late game when you just don't want to be picking up lands anymore. So you can always have the option to cycle this to get something new. We're playing 4 basic islands. Playing a Nimbus Maze. I don't know how to describe this dual land. I mean, taps for colorless and it taps for colors if we have that type of land already. We're playing Otawara as a way to return bounce things back to people's hands, including our own things. I've kind of come to realize how good this card actually is. I didn't realize how good Otawara was until I started playing it. But having that option to just put something back into people's hand, including your own, is insanely good. Especially since it channels at instant speed. We got 10 basic plains to play around with. We have a Port Town as a reveal land, so we can enter untapped if we reveal a plains or island. We got Prairie Stream. Once again, it's check land. Checks if we've got 2 or more basic lands. Razortide Bridge is an indestructible land. Reliquary Tower. No maximum hand size. Tap for colorless. Sea of Clouds enters untapped if we have 2 or more opponents, which we almost always do. Skycloud Expanse is a funnel land. Temple of Enlightenment as a scry land enters the battlefield. We're going to scry 1, and we've got our Tundra, big boy reserve list card. This is you definitely don't have to be playing Tundra, but you could be, especially since Tundra is searchable with cards that search for plains and islands. Though I haven't quite gotten around to picking up a copy that does, because up until I got it, I didn't need one. Didn't need a way to search for plains or islands because all the ones that were searchable were basic. But yeah, that's the whole deck. I've had some really great success with this deck, and honestly, this was quite possibly one of the best decks I've built in recent memory. We'll talk about the maybe board too. I almost forgot about that. So we got Blade of Selves in here. Blade of Selves I've played with limited success. Though I'm kind of feeling this way about equipment for this deck, since I don't often have things on the board long enough to justify equipping things to give them myriad. You could just choose to not exile something like a Cloud Blazer and just give it the Blade of Selves. So when it attacks, you make up to 3 copies of it if you're up to 2 other copies of it if you're playing in a 4-player pod. So you'll get potentially triple the value off of Cloud Blazer right there, basically, which is always great. But you could also achieve the same thing and protect it by exiling it with Abdel Adrian. So that's personal preference. I will be taking this out for Sword of Hearth and Home. Personally, but this is an option to play instead of that. And of course, we got Wandering Emperor as an option to play instead of either Teferi or Venser. I was playing her initially with limited success. I haven't even been able to really cast her as a combat trick, which is mainly why I've been wanting to take her out. But she is a great combat trick, a really great card to hang on to hold on to for whenever that big thing you've been waiting for comes out. Your opponent casts a big creature, you flash in Wandering Emperor, and you exile it once it goes to the attack step and is declared an attacker. That sort of thing. But yeah, get some options on the table. I'm always, like I think I always say in the description, but I'm always open to critiques, suggestions, whatnot. And I'd love to hear your ideas. So if you have any of those things, let me know in the comments. And I'm always open to those kinds of things. But yeah, that's the whole deck. So yeah, thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. And as always, follow me on my socials at ToastyTabletopGames on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitch. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.